Just before the weekend, Iran's foreign minister told me on this program that he thought there would be an interim deal signed. Instead, the 3 days of talks wrapped up with no deal and all sides deflecting blame all over the place. This while all sides still declaring themselves to be tantalizingly close to an agreement. That's the report from two of the principal players, the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif.
There was unity, but Iran couldn't take it. At that particular moment, they weren't able to accept that particular agreement.
We are closer now as we leave Geneva than we were when we came, and that with good work and good faith over the course of the next weeks, we can, in fact, secure our goal.
I think we're all on the same wavelength, and that's important. And that gives us the impetus to go forward when we meet again next time. So actually, I think we had a very good 3 days, very productive 3 days, and it's something that we can build on and move forward.
So, talks will resume November 20th. And joining me now from Moscow, veteran U.S. diplomat and Iran watcher Thomas Pickering to guide us through what just happened. Ambassador Pickering, thank you very much for joining me from Moscow. Let me get straight to it. You heard what Secretary Kerry said, what Javad Zarif said after the talks broke down. Are they all on the same wavelength? Is there really progress? Do you think a deal can be reached?
First, I think they are on the same wavelength. I think progress has been made. I think a deal can be reached, but I think there are three issues that need to be paid careful attention to that are still perhaps standing in the way of bringing things together. And this is just basically an analysis from what has been creeping out. Issue number one, can a disposition be made of the stockpile of 20% enriched material, which is now in Iran's hands, which they say amounts to 200 kilograms, less than a significant quantity that could be used to upgrade to a nuclear weapon. But should that stay in Iran? Should it be converted to a less upgradable form, either in Iran or outside, or some other disposition? The second is the Arak reactor. There clearly is a serious interest in slowing down the development of that reactor and perhaps putting it in a position where it cannot be used in the future to make plutonium optimized for weapons development, which seemingly is what that kind of reactor can do, and that's important. And the third question, and this has been a little bit deeper in terms of the mystery because people have been very careful about talking about it, how much sanctions relief should go with the deal, which has begun to take shape around the cessation of enrichment of material to 20%, perhaps the acceptance of a 5% overall limit, some effort to deal with the stockpiles, which I talked about a little while ago, perhaps some effort to stop the deep underground facility at Fordow from working. That would be, I think, a fairly healthy first stage agreement, but there's deep concern, particularly in Israel, that more sanctions will be given up to pay for that kind of an agreement than it's worth, and that will become irreversible. Something I don't agree with, but something that can be dealt with in the negotiation.
Well, to that point, I want to play you a little bit about what Prime Minister Netanyahu said about precisely that point.
A good agreement means an accord that reduces or totally dismantles Iran's ability to prepare and produce a nuclear weapon. A bad agreement leaves this capability in place and takes the air out of the sanctions, and we'll do everything in our power to convince the powers and the leaders to avoid a bad agreement.
So clearly that sentiment is being heard by some of the U.S. allies and partners negotiating, and of course by Congress. How important is what the Prime Minister has been saying publicly without apparently even knowing what the actual deal and agreement was?
But I think that he stated an Israeli position. That's his right, and perhaps even his duty. The really interesting question is, how is he going to take out of the heads of the Iranians the knowledge about how to enrich, which of course is a key, but not the only step that's necessary to make a nuclear weapon. So we're now in a position, can we find ways to make it harder for the Iranians to break out rapidly, which is what we have been concerned about. And I believe we're moving in that direction. He also seems to believe that the first agreement will be the final agreement, when in fact, I think the parties have widely accepted the view that there will be a first agreement, probably one that will try to increase the amount of time for a rapid breakout and increase the transparency so the international community, through the International Atomic Energy Agency, will know very quickly if there is a breakout taking place. And then finally, I think it's very important to realize that a perfect agreement now is probably not on the tables, particularly when it gets to knowledge of the technology, which can't be, in my view, taken away. But we can move to a good agreement, one that really achieves the objectives I talked about. And my hope is that the optimism at the end of the discussions in Geneva and a new meeting in 10 days, perhaps at a somewhat lower level, but in an effort to clean up the differences, will continue on. And I have never seen a discussion with the Iranians break up with such a commitment to optimism as I have seen on this one, despite the difficulties and the failure to bring an agreement about at this point.
All right, Ambassador Thomas Pickering, thank you as always for your insight. Thank you for joining me.